I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents. As New York gets ready to mark 10 years since 9/11, authorities are investigating a possible new terror threat. We'll have the latest. Plus, we'll take a look back at the day America changed and the decades since with Bishop DiMarzio.
And obviously Al-Qaeda is not completely destroyed, so we can't let our guard down.
And a family shares their very personal 9/11 story.
If it wasn't for our faith, I don't think we could have ever got through this. And our parish and our fellow parishioners were just fantastic for us.
Well, good evening. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. A new potential Al-Qaeda threat has New York City and Washington, D.C. on high alert just days ahead of this weekend's memorials commemorating the 10th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. A senior administration official told CNN that there is credible information about a possible terror plot, believed to involve 3 people, including a U.S. citizen. Well, this morning, police were seen stopping and searching trucks at New York City's bridges and tunnels and manning checkpoints in Manhattan. So how do we respond to these new threats as the 10th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks approaches? For more on that, I'm joined now by Deputy Chief Chaplain for the NYPD, Monsignor Robert Romano. Monsignor, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Matt.
Really appreciate having you back here. So I guess, first of all, I'll just pose that question. How do we respond, or how should we respond to the threat of an attack like this, one that they say is credible but maybe unconfirmed?
I think the important thing for us to do is to realize that every day there's always a threat. Every day is always an opportunity. If you go to not only Ground Zero, but if you go to see a baseball game, there's always a threat of something like that happening. I think we should just really go on with living our lives in the normal way that we can. I think we just have to be a little bit more vigilant in everything that we do. A couple of weeks ago, I was at a party, and I noticed a bag left there. And right away, the first thing I said was, "Whose bag is this?" And somebody claimed it right away. And I said, you know, you got to be careful. And that's really, I think, what we need to do. I don't think this is something that we should have panic in the streets, that people should be worrying to go out, because this is what terrorism is, another part of terrorism. It's not only being hurt by the terrorists, it's being scared by the terrorists.
That's true.
And I think if we bow down to that fear of them, then we've lost. And I think what we really need to do is go on with our lives and show the terrorists that we're strong, that we're united, and that we're vigilant in everything that we do.
Sure. And do you think, I mean, I had kind of a similar experience that you did when I was gone. You know, I was gone for about 2+ weeks to Florida. And the theater that I was actually performing at while I was gone, it was a working vacation. I knew all the people that worked there, but still, it had been closed and everything, but I saw a bag sitting there, a backpack in the lobby of the theater, and I thought, you know, I was freaked out for a minute. But do you think, though, that sort of mentality has just become an everyday part of living in New York, or have maybe people become complacent over the years, or is there that vigilance that's just now woven into the fabric of who we are as New Yorkers?
I would hope that there is vigilance. I think that the days of complacency are over. I think that we have to realize that even since 9/11, we've had some problems. We've had some difficulties, but thank God nothing happened from it. And I think that we should always be vigilant and use those numbers that, 911 or 311, and make sure that, if we've got a question, it's better to be safe than to be sorry.
Sure. And with the 10th anniversary of the attacks, of course, coming up this weekend, is there anything that we should be doing spiritually to prepare for this? Because obviously it's something that left such a scar on this city and the country as a whole, and really haunts a lot of people to this day.
And it's hurt the diocese, because so many wonderful people who were involved in their parishes and in the diocese were taken from us that day. But I think that spiritually we're doing, as a diocese, the bishop is going to be celebrating a Mass at St. James Cathedral. In our parish, we're going to have a celebration of remembrance, and I think that most parishes are going to be doing that. right after 9/11, I think people became more patriotic, but they also became more religious, as because the threat was there, and they lost loved ones, and the only place that they could turn to was God. And I think that for the most part, that the religious aspect since 9/11 has gone up, not dramatically as it was maybe the days and weeks after, but I think that many people have changed their lives spiritually because of that. I mean, I see that in the police department so much in the fact that everything that we do as a police department, we begin with a prayer. And that's hard for people to believe because we live in this society where there's the separation of church and state, but it doesn't exist in the police department.
There you go.
And I think that's a wonderful thing, that God is alive and well in the police department. And I think it's because of the fact that police officers realized after 9/11 that this was not something that they could cope with on their own.
Sure.
The machismo went right out the window.
Right.
They realized that they were just as weak as everybody else, but they wore a uniform and they were called to do bigger and better things. And they realized that they needed God on their side. So is religion alive and well? I think so. I think that it could be a lot better, but it's, I think, certainly on the upswing.
Always room for improvement. All right. Well, Monsignor, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate your time, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Good.
Well, stay tuned. There is much more currents ahead. When we come back, suicide bombers strike in Pakistan. We'll have details on that and the rest of the day's headlines. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure. Coming up later, a family remembers a son, father, and brother lost on 9/11. But first, let's have a look at today's headlines. 24 people are dead, 82 more are wounded, and a number of church buildings were damaged in a pair of suicide bombings in Quetta, Pakistan. UCA News reports that the home of the region's apostolic vicar, a Caritas office, and 4 Catholic schools were damaged. The Pakistani Taliban has claimed responsibility for the attacks to avenge the arrest of a senior al-Qaeda leader. Well, meanwhile, in China, a priest and a nun were beaten for demanding the return of church property. The priest sustained only minor injuries, but the nun suffered wounds to the head and chest. They were demanding, apparently, the return of 2 buildings that had been seized by authorities from a diocese in China. Well, the back and forth between Ireland's government and the Vatican continues. Rome Reports has those details.
On September 3rd, the Vatican rejected claims that they did not properly handle cases of sex abuse that were outlined in the Irish government's Cloyne report. However, the government maintains that the apostolic nuncio at that time provided a path for members of the clergy to evade full cooperation with the Irish civil authorities on cases of sex abuse. The government of Ireland also welcomed the Holy See's apology to the families and the shame the Vatican has felt. They concluded by saying that lessons had been learned and looks forward to a new dialogue. Currently, legislation being proposed in Ireland would make every member of society report cases of sex abuse. However, there has been no mention of forcing priests to report what they hear in confession.
Well, the matter of whether priests in Ireland will be required to report abuse allegations they hear in a confessional is still up in the air. Priests are not allowed to reveal anything they hear in confession under penalty of excommunication. The new law will reportedly not contain any mention of confession. Ireland's Justice Minister said the point of the law is to ensure that anyone who has knowledge of sexual abuse of children report it to authorities, quote, unless there is a reasonable excuse not to do so. Well, a court in Germany has rejected plans by a Catholic organization to post billboards welcoming Pope Benedict to Berlin. Local authorities objected, saying the billboards could only be used for election campaigns or for, quote, reasons of overwhelming public interest. The Catholic organization said it would appeal the court's decision. Pope Benedict is scheduled to make an official visit to Berlin on September 22nd. Well, there's more ad controversy, this time from the UK. The country's Advertising Standards Authority has banned an ad of an image, featuring an image of Jesus, rather. That ad, which ran during Holy Week, shows Jesus winking and giving a thumbs up to what are referred to as miraculous deals on cell phones. The Standards Authority says that although the ad was meant to be lighthearted, it gave the impression that it was mocking and belittling core religious beliefs during an important time for Christians. Well, it may have actually been a miracle amid wildfires in parts of Texas. Damon Fernandez has that story.
It was this huge cloud of smoke filling the sky that alerted neighbors fires flared up in another area, this time off FM 1486.
Booster 21.
As more firefighters are dispatched to that danger zone, they're trying to protect another 400 neighbors in the Tri-County area from being burned out like this. But the crews admit the fire's very tough.
You get in there, it starts running, you got to try to run out. You got to try to get out before the fire does.
At the same time, we found some neighbors in Ranch Crest returning home for the first time in 4 days.
Took out the fence and, of course, my neighbor's yard here.
Neighbors showed me how fire raced through this entire subdivision, burning every yard and anything on them. But miraculously, all the homes here are still standing.
All these firefighters are out here doing this all got heart, and they know these people got to come home to something. Some of them were not lucky, and we just can't get them out. We don't make it to them in time because of the heat. So the houses are so dry, they're just burning.
In the Garcia's yard, you can see the fire line goes right up to the family statue of the Virgin Mary, then suddenly stops. The Garcia's yard is gone, but they believe this religious statue is the main reason their home was spared.
She protected our home, everybody's home. We prayed to it before we left to protect everybody's home. She did. All our neighborhood got protected.
And finally, it was a night at the ballpark for the Brooklyn Diocese Catholic media. We sent our cameras to MCU Park in Coney Island.
Well, here we are tonight at MCU Park for a Cyclones baseball game. And this is a night for the tablet and the net. We are co-sponsoring the game tonight. And this is one of our favorite spots in Brooklyn, right down here in Coney Island. We spend most of the summer here. And it's tonight we're celebrating in an official way.
We've had the opportunity to expose what we have to offer to the people in Brooklyn, the Catholic population and others, the tablet, our newspaper, and Net New York TV, which is our Catholic station.
We've done this as the Net for 3 years. This is our third year doing this, but it's the first time that we've ever done it in conjunction with the tablet. We now have the Net and the tablet joining together, and what we want to do is let everyone know about us.
I think this is important for Net because it gives us a wider exposure. It gives us a chance to say thank you to some of our clients. We have our advertisers with us tonight. And plus, it's a chance for the people to get out of the office and to come here and have a good time, just with themselves, out of the work environment.
What we're hoping to get out of this is more of a relationship with our readers and with our viewers, and letting them know that the message that's coming out from the Brooklyn Diocese is a united message, and we're here to inform them, but also to find out from them what they're looking for. We really want people to know that we're available to them. That's why we have this communication back and forth, not just at events like this, but they can always reach us at the marketing department for Net and Tablet.
I love that. Some cameo appearances there by some folks who work behind the scenes here on Currents also. Gotta love it. Stay with us. There is much more Currents ahead. Coming up, Bishop DiMarzio joins us to go into the deep on the 10-year anniversary of the 9/11 attacks.
The lessons we learned are lessons of deepening our faith, of supporting one another. I think how people came together at that time was a real lesson, a positive lesson.
Welcome back. Pope Benedict is expressing his prayerful support to the American people on the 10th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. In a letter to U.S. Bishops' Conference President Archbishop Timothy Dolan, the Pope says the American people are to be commended for the courage and generosity that they showed in the aftermath of the attacks. And, though it's been 10 years since that tragic day, the news today of a threat of a new attack reminds us that al-Qaeda is still active. Ahead of today's news, I had a chance to sit down with Brooklyn's own Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio to talk about 9/11 10 years later. Bishop DiMarzio, thanks so much for being here.
Always going to be with you.
We really appreciate it. 9/11, 10 years ago just about now. First of all, I think I have to ask, can you believe that it's been 10 years?
It's hard to believe, but it's here.
Exactly. I mean, it seems like time has just flown by. And I think that's true, when you look at any big disaster like what happened on 9/11, it's something that people will always remember where they were. It just really sticks in people's minds as a day that things really, really changed. What do you think are, first of all, some lasting lessons that we learned from 9/11?
Well, I think there's a lot of lessons we learned, and some we maybe should have learned. I think, first of all, preparedness, taking seriously the issue of terrorism, which maybe we had not till that point. We didn't think it could touch the continental United States. I think that's a lesson we learned the hard way. We also learned some good lessons of how people can come together in times of crisis, how people can support one another, how important faith is to people in people's lives. Those were lessons that were learned also.
Sure. And you know, in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, we saw a lot of people coming back to church, back to Mass. You know, and even no matter what their faith was, they were going back to places of worship, and that sort of drew them back into their faith. Why do you think it is that during times of disaster, times of tragedy, people are drawn back to their faith?
Well, I think at times like that, people recognize the power of God. They deep down believe in God, and we're all in the same boat. We ask God for things. So when tragedies hit, we go back and plead with God to be good to us, to show us His kindness, to help us in difficult moments. So that's human nature. That's happened throughout the course of history, that human beings will you know, come to their faith at times of crisis. So thank God the faith is there. Unfortunately, it's good that faith is practiced at all times, not just at times of crisis, but the normal circumstances of life. But it is a lesson, again, that we can rely on our faith, especially at times of difficulty.
Sure. This is the first time that we have marked an anniversary of 9/11 since the killing of Osama bin Laden. Do you think that bin Laden now, having been, of course, the mastermind behind all of this and the leader of Al-Qaeda, do you think that his death, now that we mark this anniversary, has given families of victims of 9/11 or really anyone who was touched by the disaster any sort of closure to this event?
I think that's a difficult question to answer one way or the other. I think, you know, when they found that Osama was planning some other event on the 10th anniversary, I think that gives us a lot to think about. And obviously Al-Qaeda is not completely destroyed, so we can't let our guard down. I'm not sure that anybody can rejoice in the death of another person, no matter who they are. Does it bring closure? I don't think so. I think it's still an open sore. It's a lot of things that we have to think about. How we protect our country, how we live our lives, how we understand what forgiveness is about, how we don't target a certain group of people and say that it's their fault. So there are a lot of lessons that are being learned. I'm not sure we've learned them all yet.
Sure. Very quickly here, before we wrap up, of course, Brooklyn and Queens suffered a lot of losses on 9/11. And people are still dealing with that. What is your prayer for those who are still trying to cope with the disaster even to this day?
I think a lot of people still are very touched by it. It's something that no one will forget, certainly in the metropolitan area. Everybody knew somebody who was touched, somebody who died. It was a traumatic experience for a whole area of the country and for the whole country to an extent. But those most affected were the people in the metropolitan area, some in Washington, some there in Pennsylvania. But the lessons we learned are lessons of deepening our faith, of supporting one another. I think how people came together at that time was a real lesson, a positive lesson, that we can support one another, that we need one another, and that support can make a difference in so many different ways, and the outpouring of voluntarism and the donations that were made, and in so many different ways that showed a positive force that we have as a nation. Out of evil comes good all the time, and there was good that came out of this terrible, tragic, evil situation.
All right. Well, Bishop DiMarzio, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
Stay with us. There's more Currents ahead. When we return, the family of a 9/11 hero tells their son's story.
Even what happened, They never can take away from us the 41 years of joy he brought to our family.
Well, finally tonight, it was a day unlike any other for New York City, particularly for the many families who lost loved ones in the attacks. It was also a day when the courage of the city was on full display. Take just as one example of many, the first responders who ran into the burning Twin Towers to save others. Back in May, in the days immediately following the news of Osama bin Laden's death, we caught up with the parents of one of those brave first responders, New York City firefighter Kenneth Phelan. Kenny's parents shared with us their memories of 9/11, its aftermath, and the story of their courageous and loving son. Firefighter Kenneth Phelan is tonight's eyewitness.
They had a roll call to see who was there and who wasn't, because they really didn't know at first who was killed or whatever. Kenny nor the firemen that with him ever made that roll call. He was baptized in Our Lady of Hope Church, and he was the first child ever baptized in that parish. He attended grade school there, was an altar boy. He came on to the New York City Fire Department, and he was working on 9/11 in downtown Brooklyn. I was very lucky and blessed because the morning he went to work that day, he had to borrow a car from us. So that morning I was home all alone. We sat in the car and spoke a few minutes. And as I said to always would say to him, to be careful at work. And he said, fine. And I at that time was painting the inside of this house, and typical Kenny, he said, listen, on my way home tonight, I'm going to stop and help you paint. And I never would dream that when we parted in 2 hours, he would be murdered. Kenny was married and he had 4 children, 2 girls and 2 boys. The youngest was a boy, and he's named Kenneth, and lo and behold, he was born on Kenny's birthday years before, because he was just going to enter 1st grade in school at that time.
This picture was taken on my son Kenny and grandson Kenny's birthday, their mutual birthday, June 27th, 2001, his last birthday. It's in front of our house.
Nothing was found. Our families that were killed there are all over probably downtown Manhattan, into sewers, into the river. And they weren't wrapped in a white cloth and put into the ocean. I was happy to hear what happened and that they killed him. I mean, he had 1 shot in the head. The people that died, they had a horrible death. They were in a building with floors and floors and all the everything in them coming down on them. That did not happen to him. He was shot and he was dead. The people that were in the streets celebrating, you know, I felt a little strange about that. I wish it could have been a little more low-key, but you know, he was not to be walking on the face of this earth. He was nothing but evil. If it wasn't for our faith, I don't think we could have ever got through this. And our parish and our fellow parishioners were just fantastic for us. They were there all the time to help us. Yeah, that was a good picture to show him. That's him out there in the water. It's a tough loss, and we miss him so much. If God would have came down years ago and called to us and said to us, I will give you a boy, but you will only have him for 41 years. We would have gladly taken him, because even what happened They never can take away from us the 41 years of joy he brought to our family.
And of course, as we end tonight's show, we just want to let everybody know that our thoughts and our prayers are with those who lost loved ones on 9/11. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Currents. We'll have complete coverage of this weekend's memorials coming up on Monday's show. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Matt McClure, and we leave you now with this scene from the floor of the House of Representatives earlier today.
The chair asks that the House now observe a moment of silence in memory of the victims of the terrorist attacks on September 11th, 2001.